The fluorescent lights of the upscale grocery store hummed overhead as the evening crowd thinned, leaving only a few stragglers browsing the aisles. Among them was Daniel Carter, a self-made billionaire known for his sharp intellect and no-nonsense demeanor. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, he moved with the quiet confidence of a man who commanded boardrooms with a single glance. Tonight, however, his attention wasn't on stocks or mergers, it was on a small, trembling figure near the bread aisle. A young black girl, no older than 12, stood frozen near the shelves, her oversized hoodie swallowing her tiny frame. Her name was Tasha, though Daniel didn't know that yet. All he saw were her desperate fingers, quick but unsteady, as she shoved a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter into her frayed backpack. Her eyes darted around like a cornered animal, her breath shallow. She wasn't a professional thief. She was just hungry. But fate had other plans. Before she could slip away, a burly store manager, his face twisted in contempt, grabbed her wrist. "Got you, little thief," he barked, loud enough for nearby shoppers to turn and stare. "Stealing from a place like this? You're coming with me. The cops will deal with you." Tasha's face drained of color. "Please, sir," she whispered, her voice cracking. I needed food. I'll put it back, I swear." The manager scoffed, tightening his grip. "Should have thought of that before you decided to steal." Daniel watched, his expression unreadable. He could have walked away. He had deals to close, calls to make. But something in the girl's eyes, the raw, aching fear, stopped him. Without a word, he stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the tile. "Let her go," he said, his voice calm but commanding. The manager blinked. "Excuse me?" Daniel didn't repeat himself. Instead, he pulled out his black Amex card, the metallic sheen catching the light. "Ring up her items. Add whatever else she needs. Put it on my bill." Silence hung in the air. The manager hesitated, then released Tasha's arm with a grumble. Tasha stared at Daniel, her wide eyes filled with disbelief. No one had ever helped her before. But Daniel wasn't done. He studied her, the way her clothes hung off her bony shoulders, the faint bruises on her arms. This wasn't just hunger. This was survival. "Come with me," he said, not as a request, but as a statement. Tasha hesitated. Was this a trick? A trap? But the kindness in his eyes, something she hadn't seen in a long time, made her nod. As they walked out of the store together, neither of them knew that this moment would change their lives forever. Because Daniel Carter, the billionaire who thought he was saving a thief, was about to discover a truth so shocking it would unravel everything he thought he knew. The sleek black luxury car glided through the neon-lit streets of Chicago, its tinted windows shielding its occupants from the outside world. Inside, the air was thick with silence. Tasha sat stiffly in the plush leather seat, her fingers gripping the frayed straps of her backpack like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. She stole glances at the man beside her, Daniel Carter, a billionaire whose name she'd seen in headlines but never imagined would be sitting next to her. His face was unreadable, his gaze fixed ahead as the city lights flickered across his sharp features. She wanted to ask where they were going, why he had helped her, what he wanted from her, but fear kept her lips sealed. People like him didn't do things without a reason. And people like her? They learned early that kindness always came with a price. The car slowed as they approached a towering high-rise, its glass facade reflecting the night sky like a vertical river of stars. A doorman in a crisp uniform snapped to attention as they stepped out, his eyes briefly flickering to Tasha's worn-out sneakers before he schooled his expression into polite neutrality. The elevator ride was silent, the soft hum of machinery the only sound as they ascended to the penthouse. Then the doors opened, and Tasha's breath caught. She had never seen a place like this. The floor was polished marble, so clean she could see her own wide-eyed reflection. The walls were lined with modern art, bold splashes of color that probably cost more than her entire neighborhood. A grand chandelier dripped from the ceiling like frozen diamonds. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was nothing like the cramped shelters and motel rooms she was used to. A woman in a neat gray uniform appeared, her smile warm but questioning as she looked at Tasha. Mr. Carter, she said, shall I prepare the guest room? Daniel nodded. And bring some food. Something hearty. The woman Tasha would later learn her name was Rosa disappeared into what had to be the kitchen. Daniel finally turned to Tasha, his voice quieter now, less like the commanding businessman from the store. You're safe here, he said. No one's going to hurt you. Tasha wanted to believe him. But the world had taught her that safety was an illusion, especially for girls like her. Rosa returned with a tray steaming soup, a thick sandwich, a glass of milk. The smell alone made Tasha's stomach clench with hunger. She hesitated, then devoured it like she hadn't eaten in days. Because she hadn't. Daniel watched her, his brow furrowing. How long have you been on your own? Tasha wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, suddenly self-conscious. A while, she muttered. Where's your family? The question hung in the air like a guillotine. Tasha's fingers tightened around the glass. She could lie. She'd gotten good at that. But something about the way he was looking at her, not with pity, but with something closer to understanding, made the truth spill out before she could stop it. My mom's sick, she whispered. We got evicted. She's in a hospital now. I've been managing. Daniel's jaw tightened. Which hospital? Tasha blinked. Why did he care? St. Mary's. But before she could finish, Daniel was already reaching for his phone. I'll have her transferred. Somewhere better. Tasha's heart pounded. This couldn't be real. People didn't just help. Not like this. Not without wanting something. Then came the words that would change everything. Tasha, Daniel said slowly. What's your mother's name? She swallowed. Lisa. Lisa Grant. A flicker of something unrecognizable passed over Daniel's face. He stood abruptly, walking to a sleek wooden desk and pulling out an old photo album. His hands were steady, but his breath wasn't. When he turned back, his expression was unreadable. I knew a Lisa Grant, he said. 15 years ago. Tasha's blood ran cold. Because she knew. Somehow she already knew. And the next words out of his mouth would shatter both their worlds. The penthouse seemed to shrink around them as Daniel Carter stared at the photograph in his hands. The edges were slightly yellowed with age, but the image was unmistakable, a younger version of himself, smiling beside a radiant woman with warm brown eyes and the same sharp cheekbones as the girl now sitting in his living room. Lisa Grant. The name echoed in his mind like a ghost he'd tried for years to forget. Tasha watched him, her small frame tense with anticipation. She could see the storm brewing behind his carefully controlled expression. The way his fingers trembled ever so slightly against the photo. The way his throat worked as if swallowing something bitter. You knew her, she whispered. It wasn't a question. Daniel exhaled slowly, the weight of 15 years pressing down on his shoulders. We were together in college, he admitted, his voice rougher than before. Before I moved to California. Before everything changed. The air between them crackled with unspoken implications. Tasha's mind raced, pieces clicking into place with terrifying clarity. The way he had looked at her in the store. The urgency in his actions. The strange familiarity she had felt despite never meeting him before. Rosa chose that moment to return, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Will there be anything else, Mr. Carter? Daniel didn't look up. Give us the room, please. When they were alone again, the silence became unbearable. Tasha found her voice first, the words tumbling out in a rush. She never told you about me, did she? The dam broke. Daniel sank into the chair opposite her, the powerful billionaire suddenly looking every one of his 42 years. No, he confessed. The last time I saw Lisa, she told me she was ending things. Said she didn't want to hold me back from my dreams. His hands clenched into fists. I had no idea she was pregnant, Tasha finished for him. The word hung between them like a verdict. Outside, the city lights blurred as tears welled in Tasha's eyes. All those years of struggling. All those nights listening to her mother cough in their tiny apartment. All the birthdays where she'd pretended not to notice her mother crying over old photographs. It could have been different. Daniel seemed to be thinking the same thing. When he spoke again, his voice was raw with emotion. Your mother, is she dying? Tasha choked out. The doctors say it's stage 4. She didn't want me to tell you. Said you had your own life now. Something shattered in Daniel's expression then. The carefully constructed walls of the ruthless businessman came crashing down, revealing the wounded young man he'd once been. The man who had loved Lisa Grant with his whole heart. He stood abruptly, pacing to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His reflection showed a face ravaged by guilt and grief. When he turned back to Tasha, there was a new determination in his eyes. We're going to the hospital. Right now. Tasha shook her head. Visiting hours are over and… I own the hospital, Daniel interrupted, already reaching for his phone. And I'm done letting time run out on the people who matter. As they rode the elevator down, Tasha studied the man who might be her father. The man who had gone from stranger to savior in the span of a single night. She reached out tentatively, her small hand finding his. Daniel startled at the contact, then gently squeezed back. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The past couldn't be changed. But the future? That was still theirs to write. The midnight streets of Chicago blurred past the tinted windows of Daniel's luxury car as it cut through the city like a silent arrow. Tasha sat stiffly in the back seat, her small hands clenched in her lap, her knuckles white with tension. Every traffic light, every turn, every passing second brought them closer to a moment she had both longed for and dreaded. Daniel's profile was etched in shadows and passing streetlights, his jaw set with grim determination. The man who commanded boardrooms with an iron will now found himself powerless against the storm of emotions raging within him. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel as St. Mary's Hospital loomed ahead, its sterile lights burning like distant stars in the urban night. The car had barely stopped when Tasha pushed the door open, her worn sneakers hitting the pavement with a quiet slap. She didn't wait for Daniel, her feet carrying her through the automatic doors with the desperate urgency of someone who had made this journey too many times before. The familiar smells of antiseptic and despair wrapped around her like a second skin as she navigated the maze of corridors with practiced ease. Daniel followed silently, his expensive shoes clicking against linoleum floors that had seen too much suffering. Nurses glanced up, then did double takes as recognition flashed across their faces. The billionaire's presence here, at this hour, in this place, defied all logic. Tasha stopped abruptly outside room 414, her small frame trembling. The door stood slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of dim light from within. She turned haunted eyes to Daniel. She doesn't know you're coming, she whispered. Daniel's throat worked as he placed a steadying hand on Tasha's shoulder. Together, they pushed the door open. The sight that greeted them stole the breath from Daniel's lungs. Lisa Grant, once vibrant and full of life, lay dwarfed by hospital linens, her face gaunt from illness, her body diminished by disease. The machines around her beeped a steady rhythm, marking time she no longer had to spare. But when her eyes fluttered open and landed on Daniel, something miraculous happened. A light, long extinguished, flickered back to life in their depths. Daniel? Her voice was a fragile thread of sound, barely audible over the hum of medical equipment. Am I dreaming? Daniel moved as if in a trance, his polished exterior crumbling with each step. When he reached her bedside, his knees gave way, bringing him down to her level. His hands, usually so sure and steady, shook as they hovered over hers. Lisa, he choked out, the name both an apology and a prayer. Tears spilled down Lisa's sunken cheeks as she turned to Tasha. You found him, she breathed. After all this time. Tasha rushed forward, burying her face in her mother's shoulder, her small body racked with silent sobs. Daniel watched them, his vision blurring as the full weight of what he'd missed crashed over him. 15 years. 15 birthdays. 15 Christmases. Countless bedtime stories and scraped knees and parent-teacher conferences. All lost to pride and circumstance and terrible timing. Daniel reached out, his hand coming to rest on Tasha's trembling back, the other finding Lisa's frail fingers. The circle was complete at last. In that moment, Surrounded by the beeping of machines and the quiet hum of the hospital at night, Daniel Carter made a silent vow. No more lost time. No more regrets. Whatever time they had left, they would face it together. The golden afternoon light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Carter estate, painting the walls in hues of amber and honey. Outside, the manicured gardens bloomed in vibrant bursts of color, a far cry from the cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights of Tasha's old neighborhood. She stood at the grand piano in the sunlit living room, her fingers hovering over the keys. A year ago, she had never touched a piano. Now, the notes came as naturally as breathing. The melody she played was soft, tentative, but filled with something that had taken her months to name: hope. Across the room, Daniel watched from his favorite armchair, a leather-bound book forgotten in his lap. The lines of tension that had once defined his face had softened. His phone, which had once buzzed incessantly with the demands of his empire, lay silent on the side table. Some things, he had learned, were more important than mergers and acquisitions. The sliding glass doors opened, and Lisa stepped inside, her laughter light as the summer breeze that followed her. She carried a tray of lemonade, the ice cubes clinking musically against the glass. The chemotherapy had stolen her hair, but not her smile. And now, with the experimental treatments Daniel had arranged, even the cancer was retreating, day by precious day. Breaking for refreshments, she announced, setting the tray down with a flourish. Tasha's hands stilled on the piano keys. "Mom, you're supposed to be resting." Lisa waved a dismissive hand, but the way she sank gratefully into the couch betrayed her fatigue. "Resting is all I do. I wanted to feel useful." Daniel stood, crossing the room to press a kiss to the top of Lisa's head before pouring them each a glass. The simple domesticity of the gesture would have shocked his old self. The Daniel Carter of a year ago had known the first thing about being a father, let alone a partner. But life had a way of teaching you what truly mattered. Tasha joined them, curling into the space beside her mother. She accepted the glass Daniel handed her, their fingers brushing briefly. A year ago, she would have flinched at the contact. Now she met his gaze and smiled. The doorbell rang, a melodic chime that echoed through the house. Rosa, who had become more family than housekeeper, appeared to answer it. Moments later, she returned with a stack of envelopes. "Mail for Miss Tasha," she said, her eyes twinkling. Tasha took the bundle with curious hands. The first envelope bore the crest of the prestigious Middleton Academy. Her breath caught as she tore it open, her eyes scanning the contents rapidly. When she looked up, her face was alight with joy. "I got in," she whispered. Then louder, "I got in." Lisa pulled her into a fierce hug, tears sparkling in her eyes. Daniel felt something swell in his chest, something too big for words. Pride, yes, but also awe. Awe at this brilliant young woman who had survived so much, who had stolen bread to survive, and would now walk the halls of one of the best schools in the country. Later, after the celebrations had quieted and the sun had dipped below the horizon, Daniel found himself standing on the terrace, staring up at the stars. Lisa joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Penny for your thoughts," she said softly. He exhaled slowly, watching his breath mist in the cool evening air. "I was just thinking about how close I came to missing all of this. If I hadn't gone into that particular store that particular night." Lisa squeezed his hand. "But you did." A rustle of movement drew their attention. Tasha stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light from inside. For a moment, she hesitated, as she still sometimes did, unsure of her place in this new world. Then she stepped forward, joining them at the railing. The three of them stood there in comfortable silence, looking out over the city that had brought them together against all odds. The past couldn't be changed. The years lost would always be a tender wound. But the future stretched before them, bright with promise. Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck midnight. Another day beginning. Another chance to be the family they were always meant to be. And as the stars watched silently overhead, Daniel knew one truth with absolute certainty. No amount of money in the world could buy this. And so our story ends where all the best ones do not with an ending, but with a beginning. A beginning forged from second chances and stolen moments, from bread taken in desperation and love given without reservation. For Daniel, it was the discovery that success means nothing without someone to share it with. For Lisa, it was the healing power of truth long withheld. And for Tasha, it was the extraordinary lesson that sometimes, when you reach out to take what you need to survive, life reaches back with gifts beyond imagining. The end.